Good morning, everyone. It's a real privilege, as it always is, to be here at CI and to be keynoting especially this year's New York Regional Conference. My thanks to Bob and his singular team for putting together what I'm sure all of you have found to be a stimulating and informative meeting. Let's give them all a round of applause, please. And now that I've dispensed with the pleasantries, let me offer up both a disclaimer and an apology for this session. If you were looking for some revolutionary ROI formula, a groundbreaking paradigm shift, some up-close and personal time with ISO 22301, the elusive magic bullet, or the usual I'm okay, you're okay, it's everyone else who doesn't get us rah-rah, I'm terribly sorry to disappoint you, because you've come to the wrong keynote. We're going to talk today about survival, my survival, your survival, the survival of our field, but not so much in a BC kind of way. We're going to talk about prospering what we do. I'm going to share some of my very limited wisdom. Let me repeat that for you in case you were really expecting something big here. Very limited wisdom. But mostly, I'm going to share stories. I tell stories because I want you to laugh. I want you to laugh because when you laugh, you won't sleep. And if you don't sleep, maybe, just maybe, you'll think. But that doesn't mean we won't regale you with statistics, some of which are being discussed and have been discussed at this very conference. After all, I ask you, what is a keynote speech without stats? So here are some from the 2013 Business Continuity Survey conducted by the UK's Charter Management Institute. 25,000 surveys were sent out, 637 came back. You guys can do the statistical analysis. But here are the headlines. 89% of managers responding considered business continuity a daily responsibility. That's a good thing. 80% said their bosses thought it was important. That's a good thing. 52% of organizations with BC programs said corporate governance was a key driver. Great thing. But 42% said their BC programs were crisis reactive. 38% said their BC programs existed because customers wanted it. 45% of the organizations without a BC plan say they're rarely disrupted anyway, so who cares? 43% said, well, we'll fly by the seat of our pants. 37% said simply it's not a business priority. And this is the one finding from this survey that I'm sure, as you read the articles on it, everyone widely questioned. A reported reduction in organizations with BC programs in place. Now, the CMI did a follow-up comment on that and said, well, actually the number, that number is a little bit deceptive because the number is actually rising in terms of organizations with BC programs in place, but it's still smaller than what it was. There's been a lot of discussion of that, and we're not going to go into that right now. Finally, 3 findings from the KPMG Continuity Insight Survey, an online poll taken earlier this year, to which there were 434 total responses. 9.7% of those responding organizations that had a steering committee didn't measure the actual performance of their program. 30.3% of the responding organizations without a steering committee didn't measure the performance of their BC programs. And 18.3% of responding organizations didn't even use a major standard to support their BC programs. I want you to think about all of this. Nearly 1 in 10 organizations with some sort of governance over BC did not measure the performance of the program. And more than 1 in 3 organizations without any governance of BC didn't measure the performance of their programs. Nearly 2 in 10 didn't even use a major standard to guide their BC programs. So what does all of this tell us? Well, here's what I think it says. I think it says we've been going about this BC stuff all wrong. Now, I know I'm looking at a bunch of incredulous faces saying, do you know how hard I studied for my certification? Do you know how many journals I've subscribed to? Do you know how many conferences I go to? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. We walk around our organizations fancying ourselves as supermen and superwomen, the vanguards of truth, justice, the American way, and the bulwarks that stand between our companies and disaster. When in fact, I believe this is how we're very much often perceived. Some caped mutt who keeps running around saying, "There's no need to fear," and acting most of the time like underdogs, or worse. Here's the hard reality. For too long, we've seen BC purely as a process to save business. That's not good enough anymore. We have to bring our skills to bear to save money. For too long, we've seen our role chiefly as plan makers. We need to see ourselves now as money makers. We've relied too long on the sticks of regulation and C-suite imprimatur, in my view, which really only set the foundation for our jobs and aren't consistent from administration to administration or even from budget cycle to budget cycle. Now, it's what we do between emergencies that may very well save our jobs in these challenging, confounding times we call the new reality. We have to find out and figure out a way to enrich others so that we can share in the bounty and enrich our own BC programs too. The challenges, sadly, are often of our own making, which is where I will begin our adventure this morning. In the following minutes, you're going to see why I changed the title of this keynote ever so slightly, inserting the word real before that shop-worn conference phrase, management metrics. I'm going to tell you how we are really judged at the end of the day, and how if we match those yardsticks, we will be better rewarded and we will see increased funding and advancement for our programs. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, it is my belief, my deeply held belief, that we have done a bang-up job of overcomplicating our field and ourselves to a point where our employers can't figure out what the hell we do day to day. And we can't simply do an easy job of explaining it. You get all the charts up here, right? Because this is the kind of stuff we share with our colleagues and our clients and our partners to flaunt our certifications, explain our billable hours, expecting them to just get it. Newsflash, they don't. You see that question up there? That's actually what a former boss, a very, very smart and extremely well-respected finance and operations guy, asked on his very first meeting with me about a year or so ago. Look, he said, you and I both know that there's not an emergency every minute, and you're not testing every minute or writing plans every minute or assessing risks every minute. So I'm asking, he says to me with a perfectly straight face, what's your daily value here? For the record, that wasn't just a question for me. It's a question for you, and you back there, and you over here. In fact, it's a question for everyone in this room and everyone in this field. What in God's name do we do every day? And how does any of it make or save our bosses any money? Compadres, today in most places, the answer to that question is your daily value. Plain and simple.